I'm not gonna lie, this is a little nerve-wracking. So as far as how things go over here, instead of kind of having full drawn up site plan and everything laid out, the architect comes out of here, draws what he thinks is going to be. The land is not even developed yet, and then we come out here and we eyeball everything the first time. We got some good visions for this place, and I can't wait for you guys to experience it all on our first journey to sustainable farming. So God willing, all this helps out all the low-income farmers, or not all, I should say. That's a dream, but as many people as we can help, we will attempt to do so.
Welcome to another episode of The Pursuit of Coconuts as we build the foundation of an aquaponic farm in the middle of the jungle here in the Philippines. In our last episode, we found our little piece of heaven in the jungle, and so we have started to build the planters. And we had to figure out where to place the ponds, and we wanted to place them a little bit lower so the gravity pull would drop the water from the planters into the pond. And we brought the big machinery out to do this because we found, as we were moving dirt around, that there was tons of boulders and rocks. So now we are in the next step of putting the planters and ponds together to create our beautiful aquaponics. Okay, we wanted the planters to be super strong. We are prone to a lot of storms, typhoons, and even earthquakes. So we decided to use local cinder blocks and also concrete with rebar to reinforce the strength of our planters and ponds. And just in case the ground moved a little, just because this is newly dug dirt that's compacted, we wanted to make sure that everything was super strong. Cost a lot more, went over budget, but in the long run, it's gonna pay off.
So we're gonna have a pretty large farm, and if this farm works out, we're gonna replicate this in multiple areas. My dream goal is to have 27 more of these, so 28 total as a collective. The other ones are gonna be empowering other low-income farmers to be a part of the collective that we can really develop them. So we got to get the example down because this is new technology and new stuff here. Everything's looking good so far. Lots of work to be done, but we got this.
To my defense, I bought everybody boots, but they refused to wear them because they were just so uncomfortable because they're not used to wearing boots. So you will see tons of sandals and bare feet in construction zone, and that's just what they do here, and I couldn't stop it, so I joined them. Shout outs to my crew. They are so beast mode in all of this, just because you'll see most of this is done by manual labor, from mixing some of the concrete to bending rebar to cutting rebar. There's not grinders and stuff like that they're using. They are literally using manual power.
So these are the planters right here. They're creating the base of it because we're gonna pour concrete slabs. And so we've got each one of these three base are gonna be one planter. And so we've got one that's gonna be here. We're hoping to fit 7 or 8 more on the other side. So the ponds are going to be in the front here, in the middle, and another one. So these are about 20 foot ponds. The middle one's going to be about 10 feet. This is going to be 4 feet wide. That's going to be 8 feet. They're about 4 to 5 feet deep. And then this is the building that's behind us. And then we're going to build another set of ponds and planters over there. Pretty big operational aquaponic farm. We've got good progress. These guys are hard at work, but we're missing a few people. 2 of my lead foremen are not here, which is a little frustrating for me.
There was constant communication because as much as I wanted to go by blueprints and pre-planning, I just had to do a lot of communication and just be there all the time to explain where things go, how things are. Blueprints aren't the standards here. So with the system being something that they've never heard of or never have seen, I was there constantly showing them and even got my hands dirty and worked side by side with them just to make sure things were coming out exactly the way we needed it to come out. You'll see Boniek explaining how things are put together. So when you see the rebars being bent by hand, what they're doing is they're creating a base for the piers. Those piers are actually going to be for the building, and that building is going to be for a cleaning station, our electrical room, and a few other things, just because with the aquaponics, we're planning to put solar panels, and we have to run the pumps with electrical breakers and circuits and just make sure that everything is protected. And this little building is going to house a lot of that. Once they put the rebars together after they're bent, they have these little metal ties that they twist on to secure it. And so when the concrete is poured over it, it secures everything in place with a certain amount of space for structural integrity. The scaffolding is just local wood. We were able to use some of the trees that had fallen on our property, cut them up into little 2x4s, 4x4s, 2x2s, and they use that on the property as a scaffolding. And after they're done using it as scaffolding, it actually turns into firewood for them to cook. With the amount of concrete piers and concrete we were using, I was able to get a concrete mixer using a gas motor to mix the concrete, and it was fun for them to use, but also a big relief and made the work go a lot faster. And so this is one of the big machineries that we brought in, but mostly everything else is still done by hand. With the planters laid out, we needed to figure out how to reinforce the wall that was dug out. And so we decided to do a riprap, is what they call it, which is actually a retaining wall. And we were going to make it look real natural. We decided to use lots of boulders from the property, and even on top of the property, there's just a lot of rock. So we decided to keep it with a natural look, put some concrete behind it, some reinforced rebar, and you'll see that come together pretty soon here. We've got a lot of progress, but now we got to get really focused because we're on our stretch to try to get these ponds set up. So they're pretty much bending metal rebars to secure the pond surrounding to make sure that is really strong. 3 active ponds and 15 planters, and then we've got room, if you look down there, for 2 more ponds and 10 more planters. And then we've got our building, and we've got our pump house for all the equipment. That pump house is going to store all the pumps that will circulate the water from the pond to the planters, and then gravity will, from the planters, go down back into the pond to clean and recirculate the system here. So we're going to definitely see more progress by next week, but I can't wait to visually see what that looks like. So pretty much how we have this is we have 3 bases for the ponds and 2 openings so that the plumbing can be built in. That way we have access to everything. We also have raised beds, so that's really easy to work on when you're not having to bend down. The beds are going to be about a foot deep, so that way the roots can grow and the water can fill. And so the systems are looking really good. Once the land was formed and compacted, we are ready to start making the planters and ponds. And this is such an integral part of the design because we had to figure out how to create levels so that the water can be pumped into the planters and drained back into the pond. This was a huge task, one, because they did not know what aquaponics was. The locals never have seen or witnessed it, so I had to explain lots of the processes, and it got to the point where I just had to micromanage and tell them to do things step by step. This was 95% manual labor. We did have a tractor dig out the large hole for the pond, but the rest of the planters and everything else was done by hand. The filling, the moving of dirt, all that done by hand. And as our focus was to use local building materials, they were familiar with concrete, hollow blocks, moving dirt around, dropping rocks in, doing things manually. So we just focused on doing that with what they were familiar with. Now we have a couple of plumbers that we went through, and plumbing was a huge issue. Talk about complications, not understanding how things work. I tried to explain how much pressure we needed. I tried to explain the drop, and they just work a little differently here. It's a little bit more primitive, and on the plumbers that we had locally here in the countryside, it was really hard to find somebody who understood the specifics that we needed, so that way all the planters would get filled evenly with the distribution of the pump. We needed to figure out head pressure and all the calculations. I ended up just becoming a mini plumbing engineer and doing all the calculations and putting it all together. And at one point we just got rid of the plumber and did it ourselves, and I trained the guys to do it. So we are laying everything out before we pour concrete and finish the planters. I know I've been asked, how do I know about aquaponics and how did I get into building this? And literally, it was a call to faith, and I'm just stepping into it day by day. I had a great consultant, Aaron from Renewable Farms, that gave me so much advice, and I had to adapt, study, and learn, and each step was a learning experience for me, and I'm still learning to the day. So this is just a lesson that you don't have to know everything to get started. Just get started, and the journey will take you where it needs to take you, and that is what we're doing here. Can't wait to show you what's to come. Check out the next episodes as things start to come together, and you're seeing it now in the middle of the jungle, a little footprint of what's to be. Thanks for following along, and we'll see you on the next pursuit.